I found a super simple way to make gathers using my serger, and it's not using the gathering foot. I'm sharing what went wrong, what worked, and the technique nobody ever told me about. But now you'll know it too, and you'll never want to do gathers any other way. Hi, I'm Tony, and this is So Lounge. Now, the pattern is McCall's 8285, and if it looks familiar, it's because it was the last dress on my honeymoon sewing challenge that did not get made. Now, when I made this skirt, I had to do a lot of gathering. It's kind of hard to see with the print, but there's a tier here, there's a second tier here, and then there's a third ruffle on the very bottom. It was a lot of gathering, which took forever. And it's not even, but you can't tell because of the print of the fabric, thankfully. So when I realized I could try to do all the gathering on this dress with my serger and thinking that might speed up the process, I decided it's time to give it a go. I'm going to be making version B, which is the shorter version, but with the sleeves of C. So it's basically going to look like this. So one gathered tier, not two, shorter sleeves, but it will have the collar and the placket with the buttons down the front. Now, I've been practicing with my serger, and this is something I kind of discovered when I was making the serger video last year, and I forgot to change the tension on my serger to gathering. So it gathers if you put it on the gathering stitch, and you get a really nice even gather. But if you just keep it at the neutral tension setting, then you can gather it manually. I will do some of the gathers manually where I will gather it myself, and then we'll do the ruffle gather automatically with the machine with the tension set for gathering. And I thought that would be a fun little experiment because I haven't tried it before, but in theory, I think it will work. So I have all my fabric pressed, and looking at the pattern instructions, one of the first things I need to gather is the front of the top. There's some gathers here before you attach the front panel to the front yoke on both sides, and then there are also gathers in the center back before you attach the back yoke. So I'm gonna head over to the serger and show you how we're gonna do this. So this is a kind of weird overhead view, but you can see here, I'm gonna roll my needle down, and then the dot that I need to put the gathers in is marked right here. And see, and I have my blade down, so I have the edge of my fabric right next to the blade because I still need my 5/8 inch seam allowance to make this happen. So this is the other dot we're coming to. Okay, so when I get to the dot, okay, I'm going to roll up the needle. Okay, I'm gonna lift the presser foot, and I'm gonna kind of pull my fabric out of the way. But then it's kind of hard to get this threads to move anywhere. So you can see the threads, how they're kind of caught here. I'm gonna drop my presser foot back down. Then I'm just gonna hold this out of the way and run off the chain. So now you can see that I've got the part that I want to gather between the two dots. And then this side has the threads that are easy access. These are the left and right needle threads. And then I can just slide my gathers along there. You can see how nice and even they're going to be because the stitches are even, the two lines are parallel. Everything's all nice and lined up. So I don't have to stress about trying to do that. And then I'm just going to even it out once I attach it to the yoke so that I know exactly where the gathers are supposed to be. I attached the upper yoke part to the lower front shirt panel, and I matched them here at the notch. So you can see how much I need to bring in the gathers. It's going to be about 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to pull that over to the side. And then I'm going to just pull those upper and lower loopers out of the way. And then I'm just going to slide this along to gather this a little bit tighter because obviously I had not pulled it quite enough. Let's check it. Oh yeah, okay, so that looks pretty good. I think we got a tiny, tiny little bit. Just pull it a little bit more. looks pretty good. Let's test it out. Okay, so I have my piece matched up. I still need to even out these gathers a little bit because they're kind of bunched in the middle. So that's looking pretty good right there. Now I'm going to move on to the other one and get it all matched up and pinned. So now I have to repeat the process on the center back yoke between these two dots, and then I'll be ready to head over to the sewing machine and sew those two parts together. So I remembered I need to baste my gathers into place first before attaching the, as part of attaching the yoke, but before I put in the permanent stitch line. So I've got my gathers in. They look fairly even. Pretty happy with it. And I am just going to put this one piece aside, repeat the process on the other front piece with the basting, and then do the back, and then I'll sew all of my pieces together. All right, so I have my panels done. The gathers look pretty good. It certainly went together faster than if I had to hand gather everything and, you know, put in all this double row of stitches and then all the gathering. I pressed the seams up. I'm gonna go finish this with my serger because it's gonna look neater than just trimming it and leaving it kind of a raw edge. And then this is the back. So it looks okay. It's not 100% because I'm still new at gathering. But then the other thing I did was I sewed my ruffle together. So this is going to be the tiered part of the skirt. I'm going to go finish these seam allowances and then we'll move on to the gathering of the big ruffle and see how that goes. You can see how I've got the gathers on the front. I added some stitching, top stitching, to make it kind of look more like Western denim. And then this is the back gather on the back yoke, and then this is the other side. So these pieces are all put together. Next step is going to be to gather this ruffle. Now for this, I am actually going to switch the tension. I left these settings the same for when we did the manual gathers for the yoke pieces. And so I'm going to leave that the same, but then I'm going to change the tension on my presser foot. The front and the back feed dogs are separate, and so if I move it up to 2, it's going to gather. It's going to push them together. And the trick is going to be that the gathers are only supposed to be between the seam lines. So in theory, I'm going to stop and start again. We'll see how it goes. I think I should test this out. I'm going to test this out on a scrap first to just be on the safe side because I do not want to have to pull that all out. Okay, so that's how the gathering is going to look. I'm trying to see like if I could smooth it out between the seam lines. I think it's going to be pretty gathered. I might adjust the tension between the seam lines. We might do that and see how that works. So it's a learning experience for everybody. Put my finger down here where the seam allowance is. I'm going to lift the needles and I'm going to change the tension. I'm going to roll the needles back down and then go over the seam allowance. Okay. We'll repeat that process. Okay. Okay. Let's see how this works. I did keep it flat, so it did actually stay flat on these seam allowances by doing that tension adjustment. The gathers look very even through the rest of the skirt. So let's attach it and see if everything lines up. Funny story, I was looking for the notches to match the front to the back, and I realized that pattern piece 1 and 2, which is the front and the back, were not cut correctly. They were cut for the shirt length and not the dress length. So I actually have like this much too much on my pattern piece that I need to cut off, or the band down the front isn't going to fit because that's what I cut that for, and I don't think I have any more fabric. Plus, I'm not sure what the length of the dress will be if it's not the shorter version, if I have this extra like random 4 inches attached to it. So I'm going to cut that off, and then we will see if I have everything in the right place for the skirt. Because the weird thing is there still aren't any marks on the shorter line. All right, so I got the top of the dress shortened, so it is now the appropriate length and not like, that much longer to avoid problems moving forward. And now comes the time to see how the gathering went and if it's going to work or not. So there aren't any notches on the pattern, so I'm just gonna match up the seams, the side seams, and hopefully that works. We're going to be putting the right sides together. And I can look at this right now and see that this did not work. The gathering isn't quite dense enough, for lack of a better word, so when I match up the side seam of the bodice with the side seam of the skirt just along the front, I can already see that it's, let's see, how many inches is that? About 5 inches too long. This is on the back panel. You can see how much longer the gathers are. And then it continues to the front with the same problem. So at this point, I've basically got 2 options. I can try and redo this using the gathering feature on my serger and put my finger behind it to make it kind of gather more, which may still have similar results in the end. Or I can go and do the same long stitch, non-gathered, and then manually gather it to the amount that I need for each section. And since I don't want to rip out serging, I'd rather have more predictable results in the end. So I think I'm gonna go reserge this the same way and the gathering on the yoke, because that turned out really well. I had a little bit more control over the gathering and I knew what the end result was gonna look like. So I think that's gonna be the best bet in the long run. So I have reset my serger to the neutral position. I have not changed any of the stitch lengths, so that's still on the gathering, and I'm running over my skirt down here. It's still on the longer stitch, the basting stitch with the wider loopers. Just gonna repeat the process and do my serging the same way as before. And I'm going to gather by hand, and hopefully that will solve any problems that we've been having. Now comes the moment of truth. I have my needle threads free from the serger chain, and I'm gonna start gathering each of these sections. So I've got the, this is the front panel with the side seam pinned over here, and I've got the needle threads that I'm going to be sliding to gather. This is to attach the front skirt panel to the front bodice panel. So I'm just working the gathers. Obviously it needs to be a lot more gathered than this. It's actually a lot more gathered than I thought it was going to be, so we'll see how this looks once it's done. The dress itself in the picture does not look super gathered, so okay, that's looking kind of close. This is the long part where you gotta like work the gathers. But you can see that using the serger method with the loops, it helps keep everything a lot more even than when I do it manually anyway, and do the, the 2 basting stitches, because these are exactly the right distance, equidistance apart for the whole process. And then that looper thread, I don't know, it just helps keep everything a little bit more even. So even though I have to even out the gathers manually, they're all about the same size, as opposed to, some being bigger or smaller, depending on how far apart those basting stitches were. So I've been fiddle-faddling with this for quite a few minutes to get these gathers all nice and even, but that's the front panel attached to the yoke. So that is ready to be stitched. Now I'm going to move to the center back panel and repeat the process and get that all lined up as well. I've got everything pinned, and now I'm going to head to the sewing machine, baste it in place, then put in the final stitch line, and we shall see how it all looks. So this is one of those steps that I didn't always do, but when it comes to gathers, basting your gathers in place is kind of important because then they don't move once you go in and put them in with your regular stitch length. So I'm just gonna do this really quickly. All right, let's see, the moment of truth. How do the gathers look? They don't look too bad. It's not bad at all, not bad at all. I think that the dress is going to be cute. I realized now it's a dropped waist, so that was kind of news to me. I thought it was a little bit higher, but that's fine. I'm fine with the dropped waist. Let's put the rest of it on. I still have a lot of work to do with this. Not bad. It looks like everything's gonna match up across the front. And the gathers look pretty cute. So, the next time you need to do gathers, try this method. Let me know what you think. And in the meantime, I've got another great video coming up next. I know you're gonna love it, and I'll see you over there.